Wife left me and came back with a baby, begging for a second chance. Am I wrong for shutting the door in her face? You've heard the phrase, I never saw it coming. For me, those words hit painfully close to home. I was married to my wife for 4 years. Looking back, I genuinely believed we were happy. We had plans, a shared vision for our future. We both wanted children. From the day we got married, we'd spend hours discussing baby names, designing nurseries, and imagining our future family. She'd browse baby gear online, sending me links to tiny outfits and cribs. Those moments brought us closer. Dreaming together felt like building something solid. But everything changed the day we visited the doctor after months of trying to conceive. The diagnosis was devastating. The issue was with me. My fertility was too low for us to have children naturally. The news hit me like a freight train, obliterating all the dreams we had built together. I spiraled. I felt worthless, like I had let her down in the worst way possible. Therapy helped me regain my footing, but by then, cracks had already formed in our relationship. At first, she assured me it didn't matter. She said she was happy with just the two of us. But her words felt hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Overnight, she stopped talking about children altogether. She avoided conversations about adoption or surrogacy, brushing them off with a simple, I'm happy as long as we're together. Her behavior changed too. She started making small, cutting comments about my weight, my energy, my efforts around the house. These weren't things she'd ever said before. The warmth I'd once known was replaced by something colder, distant. Still, I tried to trust her. I told myself I was imagining things, that we could work through it. But as the months dragged on, it felt like we were just roommates, coexisting under the same roof without the connection we once shared. Then, one day, she announced she was going on a girls' trip to America. It wasn't unusual, as she'd traveled with friends before, and I always supported her adventures. I even helped her pack and drove her to the airport. Her last words before boarding lingered with me. Thank you for being so supportive. At the time, I thought she was just being kind. But looking back, it was a goodbye in disguise. When her flight landed, I called her, but there was no answer. Hours passed, then days. My texts went unread, and her phone went silent. I reached out to her sister and her friends only to learn the shocking truth. She wasn't with them. She hadn't gone on a girls' trip at all. She had left me. She planned her escape down to the last detail. The coldness, the distance, the lies, it all made sense now. I spent weeks in denial, obsessively calling her, leaving messages, and hoping for an explanation that never came. Her family was just as blindsided. Her mother tried to comfort me, cooking meals and sitting with me as I pored over every detail, trying to make sense of it all. Was it my fault? Could I have done something differently? Therapy became my lifeline. My therapist helped me understand that her leaving wasn't my fault. She made a choice, one I couldn't control. Slowly, I began to pick up the pieces of my life. I started working out, reconnecting with old hobbies, and rediscovering myself. Months turned into years. I was finally beginning to heal when she showed up unannounced at my doorstep with a baby in her arms. She begged for a second chance, tears streaming down her face. She confessed that she had left to find herself and ended up with someone else, but now she wanted to come back. I stood there, staring at the woman who had once been my world, and felt nothing. Her betrayal had cut so deep that there was no room left for forgiveness. I shut the door in her face. So, am I wrong? Wrong for choosing myself after years of pain? For refusing to let her back into a life she shattered? I started reading literature I'd long neglected. Gradually, as I rediscovered myself, my work improved. Initially, I was just going through the motions, barely keeping up. Yet, even in the chaos, putting effort into something gave me a sense of control, one of the few accomplishments that felt like mine. I'd always been skilled at what I did, but now I poured everything into it. The long hours, the focus, it paid off. I earned a promotion, something I never could have achieved if I'd been consumed by my problems. But there were still tough days. A photograph, an old movie ticket, or some small trinket would resurface, dragging memories of her back into my mind. I'd wonder, did she ever think of me? Did she regret what she'd done? Over time, these painful moments grew less frequent. Each time, I let go of the memories a little faster, moved on a little easier. I reconnected with old friends, people I hadn't seen much since getting married. We picked up hobbies I'd abandoned: hiking, trips to the golf range. Having someone beside me who wasn't tangled in the mess, who could help me heal without pulling me back, was a relief. Looking back, I realized how much of myself I'd poured into that relationship. Being her husband had become my identity. When she left, it felt like she'd taken a piece of me. But bit by bit, I was rediscovering myself. It wasn't quick or easy, but I was making progress. By the end of that year, I no longer saw myself as the man she'd left behind. I had rebuilt my life. I had survived. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could live without her shadow looming over me. Life finally felt normal again. My work was thriving. My friends kept me busy, and even the memories of her had dulled. I rarely thought about her anymore. But one quiet Saturday morning, everything shifted. When the knock came, I opened the door expecting a delivery or a neighbor. Instead, there she was standing on my doorstep, holding a baby. For a moment, I froze. It was like seeing a ghost. She looked almost the same, maybe a little more worn. And somehow, she had the nerve to smile, as if I'd be happy to see her. "Can I come in?" she asked, her tone casual, as though years hadn't passed, as though she hadn't left me shattered. I didn't let her in. Instead, I told her to explain herself right there. So she did. She claimed she'd made a mistake by leaving, that she'd realized what she'd lost. "This is our second chance," she said, glancing at the child in her arms. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wanted to come back, to act like we could just pick up where we'd left off, as if the baby in her arms was some magical reset button. She admitted she'd left because she wanted a child, and I couldn't give her one. She said it like it was nothing, as though she hadn't destroyed my life in the process. The man she'd left me for was gone now, but she had her child and wanted me back. "You left me, had another man's baby, and now you think you can just come back?" I asked. She started crying, apologizing, begging for another chance. She claimed to love me, to want to be a family again, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. It wasn't love, it was convenience. She even tried to guilt-trip me, talking about how hard it was to be a single mother, as though her decisions weren't the reason for her struggles. "You made your choice," I told her firmly. "There's no second chance here." Her face twisted in shock, then anger. She accused me of being selfish, of not giving her a chance to make things right. She even had the audacity to claim that the house was still hers, as though she hadn't abandoned it and me years ago. I didn't raise my voice or argue. I simply said, "We're done. Then I shut the door in her face. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Her voice, muffled behind the door, faded into the background. She might scream or cry, but I was free of her. The woman I'd once loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who thought she could come back whenever it suited her. For the first time, I felt truly at peace. The life I'd rebuilt was mine, and no one, not even her, could take that away from me. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was the kind of laugh you can't hold back, born out of sheer disbelief. The nerve of this woman was unlike anything I'd ever seen. My laughter, however, enraged her. She acted as though I was the one at fault, as though I should feel guilty for not giving her my full attention. "You left," I said firmly. "You threw everything away when you had the chance. I'm not going to pretend like nothing happened just because you want me to." She flushed with frustration, insisting, "You don't understand how hard it was for me." She rambled about how lost she had been after leaving, claiming she realized her mistake too late. But I wasn't buying it. "You made your choice," I said coldly. "You planned it, lied about it, and carried it out. Your regret means nothing now." That's when her demeanor shifted entirely. Gone was the remorseful act, replaced by anger and accusations. She attacked my character, calling me unfair for not giving her another chance. At one point, she even spat out, "I could have taken everything from you back then if I'd wanted to. Half of your possessions." I stood there, stunned. Here was a woman who had left me without a word, now expecting gratitude for not stooping lower. "Am I supposed to thank you?" I asked, incredulous. "Thank you for simply leaving without completely destroying me?" Her face was a mix of fury and desperation, but I didn't care anymore. That moment marked a turning point for me. The years of guilt, self-doubt, and blame I'd carried since she left vanished. I finally saw her for who she truly was. But she wasn't done. She paced my porch, yelling about how I'd regret this, that I'd never find someone like her. The irony of her desperation was almost comical. She even blamed me for her decision to leave, claiming it was my failure to understand her need for a child. I cut her off. "You could have told me the truth if that's what you wanted. You didn't have to lie and act like everything was fine." Her silence told me she had no rebuttal. She tried one last tactic, holding up her child like a shield. "Think about him," she pleaded. "He deserves a father." But I refused to be manipulated. "That child isn't mine," I said firmly. "And neither are you." That was the end. She realized at last that I wouldn't budge. I closed the door, shutting her out physically and emotionally. The weight I'd carried for years lifted, replaced by a sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. The fallout was swift. A few days later, her mother reached out, apologizing for her daughter's actions. She admitted to being ashamed and had tried reasoning with her, to no avail. Her mother had always been kind, and I appreciated her support. But I kept my response brief. This wasn't my burden anymore. Through social media, I learned she had moved back in with her parents. The men she left me for, long gone. She was left to fend for herself, burning bridges with anyone who might have helped. Even her parents were struggling to support her and the child. Her father called me shortly after, subtly hinting that I might help financially. I declined, reminding him that his daughter's decisions were her own. The guilt trips continued briefly, friends reaching out to persuade me to forgive and forget, to step up for the child. But I stood firm. I had spent too long rebuilding my life to let anyone pull me back into her chaos. Eventually, the call stopped. The world moved on, and so did I. For the first time in years, my life felt peaceful. I found joy in the small things: reading, cooking, taking long walks. My life was mine again, no longer tethered to her mistakes. When people asked about her, I kept my answers short and polite. I didn't need to relive that chapter. She was a part of my past, nothing more. The last I heard, she was still bouncing between her parents' house and friends' couches, struggling to find stability. It wasn't my problem. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. For the first time since she left, I felt truly free. The quiet contentment I'd found in moving on was enough. Thank you for sticking with me through this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more real-life tales. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.